Hello everyone, Selamat Sejahtera. Welcome to the November 2020 edition of Readings at Home. I am Uthaya Sankar SB and I am thrilled to introduce the writers who have agreed to share their readings with us. Thank you, Sharon Baka, for bringing us all together, physically all these years and virtually since MCO. And thank you, Paramanandam Arulanandam, or fondly known as Param, for putting all the videos together. All right, gather around, come closer, virtual hugs. Hi, hello. Please increase the volume and let's enjoy the November 2020 edition of Readings at Home. I'm delighted to welcome our first reader, the Malaysian-born. Oh yes, we love saying that, don't we? Our first reader, the self-made Litt Woon, a writer, an anthropologist, a certified mushroom professional with the Norwegian Mycological Association. She first visited Norway as a young 18-year-old exchange student, and the mushy stuff aside, Litt Woon met and married and spent 30 wonderful years with her beloved husband. And one day in 2010, everything changed. Litt Woon's book, The Way Through the Woods, which is available in at least 13 languages, tells of a journey to overcome grief through the encounter with nature and mushrooms in particular. From Oslo, Norway, let's meet Litt Woon.
This is the story of a journey which started on the day when my life was turned upside down. The day when Ayof went to work and didn't come home. He never came back. Life as I had known it was gone in that instant. The world would never be the same again. I was devastated. The pain of my loss was all that was left of him. It tore me apart, but I had no wish to dull the agony with painkillers. I wanted to suffer every ounce of the torment raw. It was confirmation that he had lived, that he had been my husband. I did not want that to be gone as well. I was in free fall, I who had always been in command and in control, I who liked to have a firm grip on things. My lodestar was gone. I found myself in unknown territory, a reluctant wanderer in a strange land. Visibility was poor, and I had neither map nor compass. Which way was up? Which way was down? From which corner should I start walking? Where should I set my foot? There was nothing but blackness. But it was out in the open woodland, on moss-covered ground, that I stumbled on what I was searching for. My exploration of the mushroom terrain also became a ramble through an inner landscape, a via interna. The outer journey has been time-consuming. So too has the inner journey, and it has also been turbulent and challenging. For me, there is no doubt that my discovery of the realm of fungi steadily nudged me out of the tunnel of grief. It eased the pain and became my path out of the darkness. It offered me fresh perspectives and led me, little by little, to a new standpoint. Only later did it dawn on me that mushrooms had been my rescue in my hour of need, and that seemingly unrelated subjects, such as mushroom and mourning, can, in fact, be connected. That is what this book is about. I'd better start, therefore, with the beginner's course on mushrooms. Since I became bitten by the mushroom bug, I have discovered an invisible, parallel world right at my feet, one with its own unruly logic and wayward vitality, a magical world which I would once have walked straight past, unwitting. One thing is the sense of mastery that comes with more knowledge and more practice in exploring a forest. Something else, and quite unexpected, is the feeling of euphoria. My heart leapt the first time I found a delicious edible mushroom on my own. Was this happiness? It was staggering to actually feel an emotion I thought had gone for good when Ayof died. It was like being given an intravenous shot of multivitamins. What a sensation! Elation bubbled out of every cell in my body. All at once, a slender golden beam of light pierced my soul. Find one mushroom, and there's a good chance that you will find another nearby. The thrill of discovery is cumulative. One mushroom, one delight. Two mushrooms, double delight. Slowly but surely, as time went on, the pattern of my days began to change. It was when I was free to go mushroom hunting that this new life gradually began to blossom. These outings gave me the push I needed to get out of the house and take part in life, instead of staying immersed in misery within its four walls. It also made it easier to get to know people in the mushroom community who made me feel welcome on their outings. I was taken to places in and around Oslo which were totally unknown to me. With each new mushroom I learned to identify, every new site I visited, and every new mushroom buddy I made, I gradually became more integrated into the community. And although I didn't know it, each of these experiences represented another tiny mouse step towards the end of the black tunnel of mourning. I dreamed of becoming part of the inner circle of the mushroom community, the mushroom inspectors who conduct checks on mushrooms picked in the wild throughout the season. I was impressed by the extent of their knowledge and the sense of vocation that prompted them to spend their free time helping residents of Oslo who wished to pick mushrooms. For the first time since Eyolf's death, I felt I had a goal and a direction. For a long time, I thought it was just a coincidence that mushrooms of all things should have been the saving of me. But when I took up mushroom gathering, I still wasn't really capable of mixing with other people. So maybe I was better off with only hush woods and mute mushrooms for company. Not until had I emerged from the tunnel of grief was I ready for other forms of recreation. So on reflection, maybe it wasn't that much of a coincidence after all. Mushrooms have changed my life. When I go mushrooming, I'm looking for food, but I'm also pleased to find inedible but mycologically interesting fungi. And a trip to a new mushroom site with a new mushroom buddy simply adds to the experience. On a ramble through the fungi kingdom, the senses have to be switched on, the mind tuned in. I sense something new, therefore I am a new person. Foraging gives me a feeling of flow, mushroom flow. That is what I'm hunting for, that sense of being one with nature. I hunt to survive and to live. To feel the flow is to find meaning, and to find meaning is to quiet and transform the storm inside. Looking back on it, I can see that my journey through the landscape of grief gradually turned into a progress towards a new spring. Through my outer and inner journeys, life came creeping back, and I had the unwanted feeling of seeing myself anew. Come to Valka with us. Stum and Drang are playing tonight. There used to be Oslo Tango Forening, you know. My old university professor came out with this impromptu invitation. When I happened to bump into him on the street late one weekday evening. I had just left work. I was mentally drained and had been looking forward to getting home. Nonetheless, he talked me into it. The joint was already jumping when we stepped into the warmth from the street, where the cold bit right to the bone. I had looked into Valkyrian once, just out of curiosity, many years ago, but had turned on my heel in the doorway. The air had been thick with cigarette smoke, and the bar's patrons had seemed almost to blend in with the grey wallpaper. Not my sort of place. It was a different story this time. There was the same old jumble of tables and chairs, but they were no longer enveloped in tobacco fumes, and there was a band playing lively gypsy music. There did seem to be a free seat on the house. On the walls hung photos of Willy Brandt and Leo Trotsky. The customers were a motley mix of diplomats and down and outs. I would have had a hard time telling which were which if my professor friend hadn't been there to tell me. The average age and academic level were high. Latin quotations would not have been met by blank stares here. But there was nothing stuffy or straight-laced about the cheers which greeted particularly popular numbers. 5 musicians, each with a glass to hand, were playing their hearts out. Were they paid in liquid vitamin B, I wonder? The violinist had come straight from a concert with the Oslo Philharmonic, but the metro ran straight from the concert hall in the city center to Majustra, so that was no problem. Valka blossomed with all its charm. People clapped and boisterously called out their requests to the band. They appeared to know all 5 members personally. Occasionally, the audience would be shushed by a few particularly keen fans, anxious to hear the words of a song or a solo passage. After a few subsequent visits to Valka, I know now that here you can also have the pleasure of hearing cheerful amateurs who will take the stage with their instruments to provide entertainment while Sturm and Drang enjoy their half-liter break, or more often after the band is finished for the evening. At first, it was a physical sensation. The great yoke that had been bearing down on my shoulders vanished from one moment to the next. At that same instant, I felt my spirits lift. It reminded me of the first minutes after a blood transfusion at the hospital. Oxygen seemed to surge and swirl through my veins out of sheer bliss. In the depths of my distress, I had as little sparkle and energy as an old dish rag. But now I had the urge to do a few extra push-ups and add a few more plates to the barbell. Now the birds sang in chorus. Wasn't that the robin I heard, welcoming the break of day? Spring was in the air, and the snow was starting to melt. The snowdrops and the winter, the connites, had made their appearance on the little strips of garden outside the tenement buildings in Fagerborg. At last, my heartbeat and that of the universe were in sync. At last, my heart could smile again. Now it was easy to get up and greet a lovely morning. I looked out of the window and saw the world with fresh eyes. I wanted to be part of that. Where is Eyolf, now that my grief is not crowding out everything else? He is an imprint on my heart, which I will carry with me all my life. But I have to admit that I always spare an extra glance for couples, not young people, but those of a more mature vintage, walking by hand in hand.
Thank you for that wonderful sharing. As Long Litt Woon mentioned in an interview, we need to talk more about grief. That aside, let's move on to our next reader, Aizuddin H. Anuar from Pahang. Aizuddin writes about memory, identity, migration, and family. His fiction and non-fiction have been featured in BFM, yes, the business station, the Mekong Review, and in anthologies such as Endings and Beginnings and Telltale Food. And the recently published The Towering Petai Tree is his first collection of stories and reflections. For non-Malaysians, before you Google Petai, let's listen to Aizuddin as he recalls a very emotional memory about a tree that is no more. Over to you, Aizuddin.
Hello, my name is Aizuddin H. Anuar, and I'm so happy to be joining you for readings at home today. I'm going to be reading some stories from my new collection called The Towering Petai Tree, which was recently published by Laras 99. You can contact the publisher if you're interested to get a copy. The first story I'm going to read is called Enduring, and I'm going to read an excerpt from this longer piece. Had he missed the junction or taken a wrong turn somewhere? He wondered once, when he was driving down roads that curved and twisted around rolling hills deep into Huludumun. As the eyes and ears of the Haji, he was dispatched to inspect a secondary school in the aftermath of a seasonal flood. The library had been submerged underwater, and the computers, crucial to sustain student interest and maintain attendance, laid in silt and ruin. In Huludumun, many of the children never end up leaving the kampung in their lifetime. Most of them have never even reached the state capital, Kuala Terengganu, much less other parts of this vast country. They went on to inherit the works of their forefathers, manning sundry shops and weekly market stalls, rubber tapping, doing woodwork, and tending to farmlands passed down by their ancestors. His recommendation was for the Haji to invest in the repair of the library and to donate more computers to the school. Then came a few sleepless nights, wondering about the students he met and what would become of them. As reality dissolved around him on the way towards slumber, he tried hard to recall their names, though he will most likely never see them again. They would eventually escape his memory altogether. More recently, he had survived the bumpy dirt roads towards the interior of Kapit in Sarawak, a journey that rewarded him with a persistent backache for a few weeks. He had to bargain with a palm oil plantation owner before he was able to cut through the private road that led to a newly established school meant to serve children from 5 far-flung villages. There was no electricity or phone reception. Rickety tables in the makeshift open-air canteen seemed to be coated by multiple layers of dust. The headmaster greeted him in his office, which in the day trapped heat like a sauna and at night doubled as a bedroom. He noticed and tried hard not to stare at the portly man's shirts and trousers folded neatly in the corner, the tins of assorted cream crackers under the portable stovetop, and the mosquito net suspended from the ceiling, bundled up to one side of the room during the day. Once he returned home, he informed the Haji of the school's challenges and the good spirits of the young teachers despite such insurmountable odds. A few weeks later, solar panels were installed at the school per the Haji's instructions. He would return home from visits such as this to relay the stories to his father, a retired senior government officer. As he lamented on this issue and that issue, the lack of basic infrastructure, the chasm between the urban and rural populace, the government's complex bureaucratic machine, his aging father often listened silently, like an antique sculpture in repose, a book or newspaper in hand. The old man nodded occasionally and appeared unperturbed by his son's fiery, passionate concerns. "You are too idealistic," his father often responded simply. "You think I haven't seen the same things. Sooner or later you will learn to pick your battles. Don't lose sleep over it, lah." Back in the day, His father began his teaching career in a number of rural schools in their home state of Pahang, moving up to eventually administer the state education department until his retirement. As a young man, his father had to wade rivers when boats were stranded in the shallow sandbanks, cut through thick jungles, traverse muddy ravines and unmarked footpaths, all in order to serve children who could not otherwise access mainstream education. Yet, in his golden age, his father bare almost no sentimentalities, nor did he romanticize the virtuousness of his past vocation, offering advice that was both pragmatic and measured. Son, just do good by your Haji's money. Get as much experience as you can, and then go find a more stable, less troubling job, his father suggested with a chuckle, though it was not what he wanted to hear. What was it he craved? Songs of praise for answering a noble call? Paternal validation for a shared crusade? But don't quit before I get a chance to meet this generous Haji of yours, his father added, shaking his head knowingly. Didn't I warn you not to go into education? At least you're not a teacher like I was, kan? Thank God for that. That's the end of that excerpt. Next, I'm going to read a short reflection which is called Writing as Swimming. Sometimes the writing life works like this. First, you are swimming in the sea of your own mind. Long days and nights blur into a shapeless thing. You are writing and writing and writing, no end in sight. You try to keep yourself afloat, to feel like you're in control of the craft. At one point, it seems like you are watching yourself writing, as if from the outside, and you keep going until you need to, because you do not know otherwise. Persist long enough. You reach a point where your mind decides to walk out on you. You agree to follow suit. All at once, you find yourself in an entirely different sea, where people speak a language you do not understand, where you are not compelled to write, and then strangely you can breathe more evenly. You float. You see enough of the shore before you need to swim again. Inhale, you convince yourself, resolute, and then you keep going. 17 July 2018. The final story I'm going to read is the title story from this collection, The Towering Petai Tree. After a hectic stint in the big city conducting interviews, I was relieved to be back home, subdued by the gentle lull of kampung life. A few days ago, the towering petai tree, Parkia speciosa, in our lawn was felled to provide some clearing for sunlight. It is possible that Ma and Abba feel a bit too caved in by the remnants of what before was dense forest. Ma recalled stories of Moyang, hearing the roar of tigers from across the river as sunset approached, signaling the time for her to make the walk uphill to a relative's place overnight, and of one coming head-on with an elephant, each startled by the alien sight of the other in the Kebun Getah. These days, such majestic creatures have retreated further inland into the green thicket. To sight or hear one in close proximity is a rarity bordering on myth. We now dwell in the boundary that purports to separate nature and man, as man encroaches more boldly across the frontier, grasping to tame the former in fits of desire. This zone is experienced as an awkward in-betweenness, as convenient hybridity, at once haunted and comforted by memories of things no more. The lived metaphor is thus: following bouts of overnight rain, even after the petai tree splayed diagonally in our lawn has been hacked into smaller bits, the softwood reserved perhaps for a bonfire, the green bits returned across the border to the neighboring green thicket, a memory remains, haunting and comforting. Ma asks me repeatedly if I notice it. The nutty, pungent smell of petai wafts in the lawn, invisible, transcending its season, though the tree that bears its fruit is no more. 19 October 2019. Thank you so much for the time and opportunity to read for you today. Please take care and stay safe. Bye.
Frankly, I am not a Petai person, but Aizuddin's reading brings back memories of the nature around us. Thank you so much, Aizuddin, for the beautiful reading. Next, we are going to Langkawi to meet Karina Bahrin, a former Kuala Lumpurian, if such a term exists. She left KL 8 years ago and now runs a small hotel in Langkawi. It seems the COVID-19 and MCO since March 2020 has made Karina run out of excuses not to write. Hint, 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 fellow writers. Anyway, Karina has recently completed her first novel, Blind Country, and she has agreed to share an excerpt from the first chapter. Tell us more, Karina.
Hello everyone. Before I read you the excerpt, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Blind Country. Blind Country is the story of a woman named Jasmine Leong who was raised by her grandmother and she never knew her parents. Now Jasmine's biggest ambition is to become the CEO of Phoenix, which is the Leong family's company, also known as Malaysia's finest purveyor of bakwa, or very unhalal pork sweetmeats. Now, the problem arises when Jasmine discovers that her long-lost mother is not only very much alive, but also a Malayu Muslim woman named Salma. So as you can imagine, because this then technically makes Jasmine also Malay, it doesn't exactly make her the most, let's say, kosher candidate for running a very unhalal bakwa company. So here's a scene from chapter 1 of Blind Country, and it takes place at the public listing of Phoenix before Jasmine finds out the truth about her own mother. It has taken several lifetimes to get here, 30 seconds to 9 a.m. On stage, Jasmine Leong gives her somber charcoal jacket a cautious tug, hoping its drooping top button will not fall off. Its thread is anchored to the inside of her jacket with a scrap of sellotape scrounged from her car's glove compartment. She didn't double-check today's outfit last night, too drunk from hours of waiting for Iskandar. He didn't turn up, the bastard, despite his promises. His wife was down with a cold. At 48, Jasmine is the ideal mistress. Not a wife, never a mother, and gainfully employed, with little need for matrimony to complicate matters. Men describe her as interesting, their blooming desire quelled by the quicksand of her shifting favor. A warning sign that if they get too close, she may render them stupid or timid, their weaknesses revealed on their own. In Kuala Lumpur, sometimes even overseas, she is known as the Bakwa Princess. To the small city's other socialites, it is cause for slight derision. Being called after sticky sweetmeats is hardly the height of glamour. Unlike those whose fathers run fleets of private jets or hawk jewels to their rich friends' wives and mistresses. Only one other woman stands on the small podium, flanked by a retinue of men. Jasmine's grandmother, Madame Leong, is the company's CEO. Her son was murdered in the racial riots of 1969. Her husband died some 30-odd years back from cancer. Decades of clawing and cutting through the coarse male fabric of business dealings has left her inside scarred and hardened. She seldom, if ever, shed a tear after her husband's passing. In seconds, Phoenix Public Limited will debut on Bursa Malaysia. The Leong family company, more than 100 years old, is becoming a 21st century entity. Not that Phoenix needs any introductions in Ipoh, the northern town once famous for its tin ore. The company owns 1/3 of Ipoh's property developments, yet everyone still knows it for its sweetmeats. Malaysian Chinese living abroad acquire cartons of it on their homecoming sojourns. Phoenix Bak Kwa is the fodder of Lunar New Year reunions. Boxes of it sold stacked in front of shops next to crates of mandatory mandarins. People flock to Ipoh on weekends to take photos in their flagship colonial shophouse, a National Heritage property. There are rumors Phoenix intends to distribute its bak kwa abroad. A sure bet, some say, thanks to the Chinese diaspora spreading across all corners of the globe. A Michelin-starred chef pronounced Phoenix's sweetmeats the most heavenly mouthful he has ever savored. Jasmine can almost taste the sharp tinge of victory in the back of her mouth. She leans towards her grandmother, vertiginous Jimmy Choo's shooting pain up her calves. Papa, I think we might be worth 1 billion ringgit in a second. A second may balance out the ledger of debt a granddaughter has accrued since being orphaned at birth. A second would make 18 long months of boxed lunches and late-night pizzas in the office not matter. A second could shift the compass of her fate, edging it truer north, where she might at last feel she belongs. For a second, Jasmine is 5 again, holding up a piece of clean white paper by its corners, afraid to smudge it with her ink-stained fingers. On it is her name in full, scrawled in careful, shaky letters. Jasmine Leong Lin Lee. But right now, her grandmother stares straight ahead, a slight arch in her thin, pencil-drawn eyebrows, cheeks frozen in a tight smile. Madame Leong grunts, lips unmoving. She lifts her chin and turns to face her granddaughter. If you're lucky, perhaps it will be enough. In a flash, an old gauntlet is once more thrown down into the light. The end. I hope you enjoyed that and that you all stay safe, stay home, and stay healthy. Bye.
Wow, we totally enjoyed your reading, Karina. Aren't we eager to know what happens to Jasmine Leong, daughter of a Malayu Muslim woman named Salma, and her non-halal pork business empire? Now, we have listened to 3 writers, and at a physical reading seance, we would take a break to have drinks, chips, meet people, buy books, and gossip. Feel free to grab a drink and some food while I introduce our next reader for the November 2020 edition of Readings from Home. Now, what can I actually say about Chuan? He says that he once worked trying to instruct computers, but as expected, they ended up instructing him. And what did he do next? Moving papers. He shuffles them between piles, this pile and that pile. Sounds familiar, right? On a more serious note, Chuan now spends his early mornings writing and then listening more during his days. With that rather absurd introduction, let's find out what Chuan is offering us today.
Hello, my name is Chuan, and I'm going to be reading to you 3 things. One is a journal entry from early in the year. A second is a very short piece of fiction, a microstory. And then the third is a piece I wrote for Sharon's course I did in September of this year. And so here it is, through times. It is 7:59 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, the 21st day of the shutdown here. And the city outside is damp. It feels like it has been cleansed overnight. It is cool. And under the clouded sky, the birds flew their arcs, two blackbirds flapping citywards, their strokes calm and long, and the ebony wings seemed to stop at mid-stroke, their black and rounded tips lingering just there, just below them, just hanging in the air like shadows reaching backwards. And one blackbird flies the other way, flies over the old port road, and they're all float, they skim just over the houses' roofs like shadows passing over the sleeping. And Passover is another kind of quarantine, I think. And I read the other day of some obscure Arabic influence to quarantine, from Ibn Sina's method to avoid contagion through isolation, his named method, al-Arba'iniya, the 40th. Though many dictionaries point towards quarantine's more Latin roots, the 40 days of Lent, the 40 days spent wandering in wilderness, 40 in itself. And these narratives wove themselves around the practice announced just after the plague, just after the Black Death, the 1377 announcement by the Great Council of the Venetian, and it required the isolation of ships, those arriving from the east in periods of self-seclusion. And for the port of Ragusa, the now named Dubrovnik, there was a month's worth, and that Trentina, weaved by those narratives, flowed into Quarantina. And so our words of isolation for quarantine, they all stretch backwards to time. Every time we speak them, they link us to the great pandemics of before, like oceans upon oceans of breaths, like millions of sighs of ghosts between here and then. And my back of mine reaches out as well, delivering something, a small parcel of memory, recalling Jared Diamond's grand tours of history, his guns, germs and steel, and how smallpox leaked from Europe into the unprepared Americas, and those tribes there, they were left bereft of quarantines. They had not the words for it, they did not know, and they died off in their millions, choking in their donated blankets. And 95% was the guess that bled away, expiring over those grim seasons. And a tiny trickle is all that is left. Their blood now pools, now huddled in reservations, the last reserves of ancient songs. And I recall reading a Navajo chant recently. Navajo chant. May it be beautiful before me, may it be beautiful behind me, may it be beautiful below me, may it be beautiful above me, may it be beautiful all around me. In beauty it is finished, in beauty it is finished. And from ancient songs I feel a kind of benediction for all our wrongs, whispered forth, spreading outward through time, blessings from ghosts. And as their words wash over me, I mull whether we shall leave as much that is as beautiful. I remember the yellows of a tree of birds this morning, their brilliant wings edged in blacks, and they were flitting between their tree and those around them. From the grey sentinel of my mornings, that tree holding a clutch of leafless branching things, holding these high over the neighbouring backyards, and its leaves just below glowed a little golden. Those birds, I thought, they matched the brilliance of their tree. And I remembered your kindness that day in our sliver of Shanghai then, so very long ago, when in turbulence and eddies of wave after wave of people, as we descended stairwells into labyrinths of subways, when the air seemed to steam upwards from the veins throbbing of fire cars below us, and you picked up the back wheels from a pram, snatching up trouble from all that royal, and you helped an old woman with her burden, and my breath, it caught at your kindness, and I fell in love all over again. And so the other day, one day ago, as I ordered my morning coffees, I added a brownie, one for the old woman I pass again and again in the foyer, who tells me her stories in repeat, but I do not mind, because she cannot move far, because of her legs, because her family is not around. And so I offered to her an offering of flour and of chocolate, our offering, and she laughed and her eyes opened wide. And I was glad for her smile and for your kindness and for whispers through time and for benedictions for us all. And that was the journal entry. Here is the very short microstory called The Doll. I made a doll drawn from red and blue coloured biro ink with light brown thread for hair. She was drawn on a wall, and as soon as she was made, she was more than alive. Her sketched face had indistinct boundaries and would move with time, fuzzy. Her expressions were animated, dramatic, theatric, and she would jump from place to place, exclaiming over discoveries she'd uncover in the most humdrum of corners. Perhaps, being drawn, she was more alive than anyone else. She raced from corner to corner of the walls, and her delight at our world was infectious. Her smiles were radiant, her tantrums were legend, and every second she would be the life of the place. Then one day, we met an old woman who wanted her off the walls. Drawn girls weren't supposed to vandalize perfectly designed walls and perfectly designed spaces, but the girl refused and kept on flitting around. The old woman was patient and went around the property explaining to me each piece of furniture, the where and when of their purchases, their prices. She pointed out the history woven into the rugs. She told me the glass jugs on the shelves. And one day, she started to tell me how a particular speaker was made, extruded from a functioning rocket booster to become the perfect shape for sound. And the girl who was so curious about everything would always listen, and this time she nudged close, too close, and so the old woman flung out her right arm, pinning the girl to the wall. I was aghast for a moment before the girl wriggled free and flew to the top of the wall over the high shelves and the upper walkway leading to the balcony. The old woman pursued. I ran after and outpaced both, meeting the girl outside on the balcony. She jumped into my arms and I suddenly knew what to do. I turned to the old woman and told her, "Do not worry. We're never alive in the first place." Then I jumped off the balcony, cradling my girl out into the unknown depths of night. And as I fell, I realized I was drawn of brightly coloured ink as well. And that was the very short story. And here is the piece written on the 10th week of Sharon's writing course. For you, for me, for us. Something for you and for me and for us together. Drink. Water changes in its taste and is so much sweeter after runs, and runs, they may scare you at first. They may seem like they stretch on and burn your lungs, and at times you may feel like you are at the edge of death, but you are not. And continuing is just one foot in front of another and then the next, a repetition to string on and on. Like a picture is just one stroke after another and then the next, and sketching is the drawing out of something from the shadows, darkening this, lightening that, and focusing on the beyond. You find the thing itself, something within that wishes to be said that is you, like seeing figures in the clouds above. So sketch like you are feeling, like you are sensing something, blending what falls, the little bits of brittle graphite, the smudges here and there, the textures of the paper itself, the smooth, these things into what may be, into what you might see, clarifying little by little, which is life itself, day after day, a string of good days resolving, because there will be the bitter days, the grey grim days, the all too painful days, the time after time when it seems like the whole world is against you, and everything you touch turns to dust and you feel constricted, opposed, unable to breathe, bound to and wrapped in chains. But that too is not real. The world is not against you. It is only whispering to you its secret, that the thing you expect of it, that it should behave like this or like that, well, it does not. And there is something of its nature you have not yet understood, something of its narrative, something of its indifferent but beautiful songs. So do not expect anyone to agree with you and then to change, because how difficult is it to change yourself? Just start running after you decide to, or to learn an instrument or even a language. And so all you can really do is to add a bit here and a bit there, adding light beside the shadows. And so by doing so, resolve the image, the story, the flow of day after day into life, into your life. And remember, you can always slow down when you are tired, and remember to breathe deeply if you need it, and even to stop for a while. And if you do, the air tastes so much sweeter. Savor those moments, the time between your struggles, the clarity before and after, the stretches of pouring sweat, life piled on, strife, the flaming pains. There is something shimmering there, something in those spaces between, a majesty in all the marvelous differences, the calm breeze after the gale, the gentle shores after the raging waves, the touch of an arm, the touch of a warm hand after all the years and years alone. And that you can roam at all is freedom, that you can feel is life. So even constrictions are like magic if only you can hear the beauty of their music, like the most beautiful strains are from the saddest of songs. Oh, and remember to practice just a little every day, because you will regret not being able to bring tunes to life, your hands muted because they are no longer familiar with the ivory or the strings or the skins below, because what you play, what you dance, this is your voice as well. And oh, that, remember too to listen to yourself, because you have a need to be heard, that you have a right to be heard. And even if no one asks you, ask yourself and take the time to listen. And whomsoever takes their time to listen to you, listen to them. Because friends are one of life's true treasures, those who let you speak your words, your truths, your soul. And sometimes It may be easier to write your words, especially when there is no one around who might listen. But listen anyways, always listen, because if you do not listen to yourself, life is so much more grim. And those bits of you, they twirl around inside wholly unsatisfied, and they gnaw and fester, and they are like death itself, a dying whilst living, which may be worse. These, the tangled up frustrations you might change, that you might soothe away, that you have agency over, all it takes is for you to feel, to listen to you, then to take one step on, then to breathe the next, because these songs, they are yours, they are you. Drink from them. Drink. Thank you.
Aha, lovely, aren't they? A journal entry on the 21st day of the MCO, a microfiction, and a piece he wrote for a creative writing course. Thank you, Litt Woon, for being part of Readings at Home. Our fifth reader for the November 2020 edition is Kulleh Grasi. He is a prolific artist from Sarawak. As most of us already know, Kulleh Grasi's Tell Me Kenyalang has been nominated for the BTBA American Best Translation Book Award and National Translation Award by ALTA, American Literary Translation Association. I hope all of you are just as excited as I am to listen to Kulleh Grasi. Let's go to the heart of Borneo.
Hai, salam sejahtera. Saya Kulleh Grasi. Hari ini saya akan membacakan sebuah puisi yang bertajuk Sendi, sebuah puisi daripada himpunan puisi buku Tell Me Kenyalang. Sendi. Pekat gelap terjurai di leher jinjang bana berkepul-kepul dari batu kemenyan. Sutera rambut membelakangi tubuh ngiur kuning lansat, tersadai di bahu malam. Asai kemedak balik belinjan, ukai gak. Bisik bakar balik belumpung, ukai gak. Engkai disebut kumbuk rayuang, tak ke kumbuk mau, serta bisik bakar bandau nulang. Bunsu angin dan bunsu ribut berkecamuk meletup-letup di dahi. Jari menenun menusuk setiap gambar yang marah, menyumpah ayam berkokok sebelum subuh. Dibayangi kenyalang ketupung yang becok berkicau di dahan. Ansara ini bukan hikayat petang-petang. Berpancar kilat halilintar, memecah mimpi bertempiaran lalang. Niang ini bandan berkata, baik waktu jang, senira bendang tengkudu, tikai, sapat beribu, upan papan calu. Menoleh sendi miringai kiki, senyum berlagu. Nyak baru terkinsir batu langit, pakai wit temu di tandan. Nyak baru berkeredu bintang buyu, mandus languk kenusung tandan. Berkedura bintang tiga, bersemayang ngau anak mensia nangka tegalan. Sendi, mimpi-mimpi yang dipeluk, mencari puisi dari hutan, ritma dari semayan, kasidah dari bunian. Tiada lagi kau cerita puak di tenun, sepihan batu pelaga, berderai beribu, pulai sendi, pulai. Terima kasih.
The October 2020 edition of Readings at Home was dedicated to spooky stories. But it is never too late to have another horror story in November, especially when Vincent Heselwood has written a few new horror stories. This talented graphic novelist from Manchester, England, has a passion for words, for their power to amuse, terrify, and provoke. Vincent is running a campaign to help a community in Zambia. We thank you, Vincent, for the great effort. And please, tell us more.
Hey folks, I hope everybody's well. My name's Vincent and I write horror under the name Eleanor Sollerstein. Before I get into the story that I'm going to read for you today, I just wanted to say a few words about why I contacted Sharon initially. The first time that I did a reading at Sexan, it was from a graphic novel that I wrote about my time living and working in Zambia, in the southern part of Africa. Recently, I was contacted by one of the communities that I worked with there to say that they're having a really hard time at the moment. They're struggling to pay for things like masks, sanitizer, soap, and in some cases, food. To try and help with this, we set up a short campaign called Frightfully Good. The idea behind the campaign is that I released 5 or 6 short horror stories, which people can download for free, as long as they make a donation towards raising money for these communities. So you read horror and you raise money for charity in one go. I'm pleased to say that we initially wanted to raise £250, and so far we've got just under 800. So we've done fairly well with it, but we are going to try and push and see if we can break 1,000. The stories will be available until December the 1st, after which I'm going to try and put them with some other stories and hopefully either self-publish or get them to a publisher who's interested in short horror stories. So if you know anybody, give me a shout. The story I'm going to read for you today is called Clean Slates, and it was written under the pen name Eleanor Sollerstein. Clean Slates. Aside from the event that changed the world forever, May 11th was a typical Tuesday. People got up and had breakfast. They sent each other emails and commuted to their jobs. They talked and fought, ate and made love. They laughed and cried, were born and died, just like any Tuesday. Some, living in the parts of the world where the sun rose first, had already said goodnight to Tuesday by the time the blackout came. They'd set their alarms for Wednesday and blindly fallen asleep, confident that the next day would be pretty much the same. Only it wasn't. The blackout came at 5:15 p.m. GMT. It lasted exactly 7.4 seconds. 7.4 seconds in which everyone, the whole world, went to sleep. When they awoke in their new reality, every person's soul was visible. For most, to experience even a 7-second blackout was terrifying. There were, of course, circumstances where those 7 seconds made a big difference. There were hundreds of thousands of accidents globally. Some people died as a result of the blackout. For those who remained, it took a while to realise that it wasn't just you. Everyone had felt it. 1 minute you were going about your day, then suddenly it was like somebody had hit the pause button. When you came to, you knew that time had passed. Only a tiny sliver, but you knew. Then, of course, there were the nodes. By 5:16 p.m. GMT on Tuesday the 11th of May, every human being on the planet had grown a node. It sat between the eyebrows, around the size of an aubergine, and looked as if it were made of delicately blown glass. Inside, a thick white liquid swirled and eddied. Within days, doctors had proclaimed to the world's frantic media that the nodes were connected via tissue and nerves to the human brain, at a point between the eyebrows where some cultures believe the so-called third eye was located. How the entire globe had suddenly sprouted a new, visible organ in the centre of their foreheads was a matter of much discussion. Some said it was a form of evolutionary process that we were unaware of. Others, a spontaneous mutation brought about by some massive cosmic event. The consensus only really formed when the nodes started to change. For the first week or so, everyone's node was the same. Early in the second week, however, some people's nodes started to alter. The effect was like seeing a droplet of Indian ink fall into a bowl of milk. A small black spot would appear and slowly begin to bleed out, leaking into the pearlescent whiteness of the liquid. Then more black spots would appear, like cavities in a tooth, spreading with a sense of creeping decay. It was in the third week that people began to agree on what the nodes actually were. Somehow, and in some way, the transparent bulb in the centre of each person's forehead was the physical, visible content of their soul. It was noted that children had bright white nodes and would remain virtually unblemished till adolescence. Newborns, still innocent, had nodes so white they almost seemed to glow. In prisons across the world, violent offenders attempted to shield the fact that their nodes were blackened, like something burnt. Experiments were done to track the effects. Evil deeds made it blacken, selfless deeds made it whiten, though some stains were very hard to remove. Who the arbiter of the nodes was remained a mystery, as did their origin and purpose. What was no longer a mystery, however, was a person's character. Highly respected individuals were revealed to be venomously wicked people with soot black souls, their protestations of innocence falling upon deaf ears. Some politicians had their nodes tattooed to conceal the blemished souls. Secretive wrongdoers suffered, their evil exposed, their souls, like Rorschach tests, splattered and stained by their deeds. The first year of Visible Souls was beautiful. There was peace, harmony, a species of love. Knowing that their every action was visible and held a consequence made people behave differently. They became gentle, considerate, more thoughtful towards each other. The world was, almost, for a moment, loving. It was not, however, truthful or free, and the cracks began to show. It was early in the second year that dissenting voices were heard. They talked about freedom, human nature, survival of the fittest. They said that whiter than white was unachievable, unnatural. They said that life being good for fear of punishment was a life wearing chains of your own making. They said that the human soul was meant to have dark spots, that evil didn't exist, but violence was natural. Violence drove survival, our evolution. Within weeks, the phrase free will was plastered on every surface. Overpopulation was still a problem that needed to be fixed. As pressure increased, thoughts of now and of me became more important. People became less forgiving, less tolerant, less pathetic. Soon enough, the colour of the soul helped the strong to pick out the weak. Something snapped, and a necessary change occurred. The whitest souls were labelled as freaks, burdens and parasites. First they were rounded up, then many were eliminated. In the fight for resources, being kind doesn't help. The stained were the strong, they said. The unblemished were the weak. Only the stained are really free, they said. Only the stained are truly human. No one wants to be unblemished now. Sin is survival. You learn to be a predator or you end up as prey. Last year, we crowned a leader. His node is as black as ebony, and this, they say, is right. Now the stained rule. The unblemished live as slaves. I can't help but wonder if whoever gave us souls would despair to see what we've all become, or if, instead, they'd rejoice at what they'd helped us to achieve, the true realisation of who we really are. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully I'll get to see you soon at some point. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for spending an hour or so with the November 2020 edition of Readings at Home, the new norm version of Readings at Six Hands, curated by Sharon Barker. We had the pleasure of enjoying readings by Litt Woon from Norway, Aizuddin H Anuar from Pahang, and Karina Bahrin in Langkawi. We also thank Chuan for his wonderful sharing. And we congratulate Kulleh Grasi on the success of Tell Me Kenyalang. Param, as usual, you have done a wonderful job in video editing. Thank you everyone, take care and stay safe.